Hello and welcome to GNN, a weekly Fallout-themed podcast brought to you by Shoddycast, makers of Hidden History and The Storyteller, a Fallout lore series. I'm your host, Charles Battersby, and with me is my co-host,
Austin Horrigan.
And we've had a big news week this week. As we record this on Wednesday morning, we've just got the new special video about Endurance. And last week, we made the mistake of recording our video Tuesday night, and the bastards in Bethesda's PR department released their Perception video the morning after we recorded. So we're going to talk in depth about Perception.
But we've outsmarted them this week. They're trying to ruin our podcast, but we got them. We got them this time.
I'm convinced that the PR intern at Bethesda is in my apartment somewhere, hiding in the closet, and they send out a signal to release the new video right after we do the podcast.
They're gonna actually release the next one tomorrow, just for fun, just to screw with us. Yeah.
And we also had a couple of interviews with Todd Howard talking about the companions and the workshop system. And we also got an adorable set of videos of River, the dog that's used for the motion capture and voice acting for Dogmeat in the game. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And I think just for me, because I like doggies, the most interesting thing is watching the real Dogmeat River running around the Bethesda offices. So Austin, what did you think of this video?
Well, it was absolutely adorable. I love the way they cut it with, I know it's just incidental, but they had the motion, like they would cut River actually running with sections of the trailers that, were her running in the same way. But if you watch it, they have a sound guy with a shotgun mic gathering audio samples. So I think not only is River is Dogmeat modeled after River, but it looks like they actually used River as a voice actress of some kind. So I think that's really exciting. I hope that because I kind of hate when you play a lot of games or watch a lot of movies or watch a lot of TV, you get kind of like accustomed to the like stock sound effects, kind of like your Wilhelm screams are like extreme examples. And so to seeing that they are probably going to be using actual audio from the actual dog, that's kind of cool. I'm kind of excited about that.
I had something profound to say, but I forgot what it was.
Charles was gonna blow our minds.
Oh yes, I was actually going to say that that actually seeing a real dog that's being used for the modeling, it does make me feel a little more attached to the in-game dog. So I think it's very clever and manipulative that Bethesda is doing this, that people are going to be more attached to their fictional companions just because they have such a realistic, object to identify with. And this is something that they used to do in the old days when graphics were really bad. They'd have it's like the instruction book that would have really elaborate art showing what the characters are supposed to look like. And then in the game, you get a grainier version of that. But because you'd seen this detailed picture of who the character is, the player could at least, imagine that while they're looking at the grainier version. And so now seeing this realistic, actual real dog that has a name running around the Bethesda offices, I think that I and a lot of other players are just going to be very attached to Dogmeat in the game because of this.
Yeah, but Bethesda's marketing in general has been really insidious in that it is well put together and also just innately cool that it makes it hard to be like a cynic about it. It's like even I'm a pretty anti-pre-order person in general, but I was like, man, that friggin' that Pip-Boy is pretty freaking cool. and it's the same thing like here, it's like, oh man, you're just trying to pull our heartstrings, aren't you? Well, you have succeeded, you bastards.
Oh, and speaking of pulling heartstrings, just I think one day ago they released a video of the composer playing the Fallout theme live in the Bethesda studios on his piano, and he's so full of emotion while he does it that it's tugging on our string. And so, yes, it is more of their insidious manipulation, and just proof that it's not so crazy that they might actually have an intern living in my apartment right now and, telling them when to release the new video as soon as we end this podcast.
It's, I say it's insidious, but And I, in general, I think it is very good to keep your guard up when dealing with any big publisher, because they are a business and they have, it's XYZ, but that doesn't mean that they're innately bad either. And I think it's good to see, it's a good sign to see that they seem to be really into what they're doing. And I think that's kind of like the first step to making a good game. And I think the problem that a lot of people have, including myself, with like the big game industry is really that it starts to become just like, let's just put out this game that fits this formula and gets, these things. And while success, kind of needs that a little bit, what's lost a lot of times is kind of that impassioned interest that the creators have. So seeing hints of that, which I hope aren't staged, it gets my hype meter up a little bit, in spite of my skepticism. So I think it's really these things that Bethesda are doing are really cool, and hopefully are indicative of at least a decent game, if not an amazing game.
But speaking of their inherent evilness, there was a video of Todd Howard talking about the companion system, and he's talking about how the dog will not die when he's a companion. And so this is a very specific set of phrases that he uses, that he doesn't say, Dogmeat's not dying in this game. He says Dogmeat cannot die during the period when he's flagged as a companion character. Mm-hmm. So some fans have speculated that means that the dog is going to die as part of the story. And now that they're showing us the adorable River running around the offices, I do think more than ever we're going to get some horribly tragic moment where if you make the wrong decision, your dog will die. And I'm hoping that it's not something that the dog has to die during a particular moment, but that maybe you as player can screw up or even make the conscious choice that the dog will sacrifice itself for someone else. And so that this may be used as a, like a motivation point in the game that, those bastards at the Institute killed your dog. Now you're going to go fire mini nukes at every single one of them. Because you've been stockpiling those mini nukes through the whole game, and now you got an excuse.
I always did stockpile mini nukes. I never used them because the Fat Man was so dang expensive and heavy. So I always had like 15 by the end of the game. I should actually use them at some point.
Yeah, the first time I played Fallout 3, I did that, and then the Broken Steel DLC comes, and now we go to the Enclave base, and now I've got an excuse to use those 30 mini nukes I've got lying around. So aside from discussion of whether or not River might die within the game, we also had a video about the workshop system, which is what they're calling the world building and enhanced crafting system. So something I noticed when Todd Howard is talking about modifying weapons and crafting these mods is that one of them very clearly says you need a science perk of level 2 to make this thing. So perks are also partially tied to your special skills. So what you can craft is going to be partially influenced by your perks and your special, along with whether or not you have all the stuff that you've gathered in the world to craft the item. And this deviates from the previous games. Austin, tell us a little bit about New Vegas's crafting system.
Yeah, in New Vegas, New Vegas is a little bit more diversified than some, but for the most part, your crafting was split into camp stuff you can make at the campfire, which were food and medicine, kind of like healing powder and whatnot. And those were tied to mostly your survival skill, but also some were, there were some that were repair and some that were medicine. And then there were workbench things that you can make at the workbench, which were like, I believe, weapon add-ons and weapon repair kits and stuff of that nature, which were mostly tied to repair, but also a little bit of science in there as well. And
the ammo loader.
Oh yes, and there was the ammo reloader where you could break down different ammo and into like rudimentary parts and build the ammo that you actually want to use. And it was okay. I was never super. It's honestly it's not as helpful as one might think. Unfortunately, it could give you a little boost to your ammo, but I never found it to be as helpful as it kind of seemed like it would be.
You see, I got very obsessive about the ammo crafting. I took all the perks and got, all my skills up so that I could make all this bizarre stuff. And every time I got a new gun, I would break down all its ammo and make the super ultra amazing ammo. And if you have, I think it's Gun Runner's Arsenal that adds in just a ton of different ammo variants for just about anything that fires conventional ballistic ammo. So I had a lot of fun, obsessive degrees of fun in making sure that my 45 automatic had the Super Plus 45 Ultra Fancy Pants cartridges. And so that's just me. I'm sure there's other people out there that were, gun nuts that had to make a whole bunch of different ammo for their different weapons. But I found that system to be a lot of fun.
This kind of actually brings me to something that I've been thinking about a lot lately that we haven't really discussed, is that we sometimes talk about like what has been done in New Vegas versus Fallout 3. If you listen to Bethesda talking about Fallout 4, they basically are acting like Fallout New Vegas doesn't exist when they're presenting themselves, because Fallout New Vegas was actually made by Obsidian, which, Charles, and some of our listeners will know that, which is why they feel so different. So sometimes I worry that things that were introduced in New Vegas aren't really going to be having a presence that much in Fallout 4. So sometimes when I look at like the crafting system in Fallout New Vegas, I'm feeling like for the most part there's not going to be anything remotely similar to that in Fallout 4, is my hunch.
Yeah, I do see that there's a thematic difference between East Coast Fallout and West Coast Fallout. And for those of you who haven't followed the history of the different companies, Obsidian is made up of a lot of people that worked at Black Isle and that worked at Interplay, and those were the old developers of the original games. And so a bunch of those people then ended up making Obsidian, and it's no coincidence that Obsidian was then asked to do Fallout New Vegas. And with Obsidian, they had a great deal of reverence to their established lore and the backstories, and some old familiar faces would pop up from Fallout 2 or Fallout 1. And in Fallout 3, we didn't see quite as much of that. And with Fallout 4, we can only speculate irresponsibly on it. But because it takes place at around the same time as Fallout 3, and hypothetically before Fallout New Vegas, or maybe at about the same time as Fallout New Vegas, we're probably not going to see returning faces of people that have traveled all the way across the country just to appear in Fallout 4. So about a month or so ago, we did an episode where we kind of, humorously said, Fallout 4 is like Call of Duty, and boy, were people mad at us. But when I was looking at Todd Howard talk about all the different modifications you can put on your little laser pistol, I was like, that looks exactly like what I've been doing in Call of Duty and Battlefield for years. That you can put on this little grip, it gives you a plus 2% bonus to how fast you can draw it, and this stock gives you a plus 2% to accuracy. And so all of this stuff that I'm seeing with these little minute crafting options, they look a lot like all the accessories that you can put on your guns in Battlefield and in Call of Duty and in the more traditional competitive shooter games. Mm-hmm. So Austin, am I crazy here, or does this new crafting system look a lot like Dead Island meets Call of Duty?
I don't think you're crazy, and I don't think we're crazy for drawing those kinds of comparisons. Like, Bethesda very seriously wants to make a good RPG first-person shooter / third-person shooter hybrid, and the smart thing to do is to look at other successful formulas and incorporate features that people liked. So, I mean, when we talked about it to begin with, and it drove people nuts, I think they're reading it too much as Fallout New Vegas, they're reading it too much as Fallout 4 is gonna just be a wartime first-person shooter with no RPG elements. It's just be a copy-paste. No, it's just taking elements that are cool, like weapon crafting and tweaking stuff is cool. And if someone else did it well, there's no reason to not be like, well, let's take it and sprinkle some Fallout nuclear dust on it. So no, I don't think you're out of line at all to say that.
I love how you use the phrase "fallout nuclear dust." Like there's the radiation fairy that goes around with her bag of magic radioactive dust and turns things into a retro futuristic apocalypse. Something that was revealed last week that we didn't get a chance to talk about in detail was the perception video. So perception, there were a couple of surprises in this. Now, we learned that perception is going to affect things like shooting, accuracy in VATS. It's implied it'll have something to do with sniper builds, either being able to see long distances or being more accurate over a long distance. And now it's also going to be part of a bunch of stealth skills. So now the stealth system has changed throughout the life of the Fallout franchise. Originally, in the first couple of games, all the different stealth things were broken down into a whole bunch of different skills, and in Fallout 3, they started compositing them together. So now that we get these perk systems where some of the skills are going to be broken up into a separate perk, I suspect we're going to see, lockpicking is a perk. Picking pockets is a perk, sneaking around is a separate perk, and we're going to start seeing them branching out into specific skills. And one of the things that's completely new is that it seems that perception is going to be used for picking pockets instead of the old agility ability. What do you think about this?
It's okay. For my first thing is that I am a little depressed because agility is the second to last special trait, and they're going in order. So it means we're still several weeks away from seeing what's different about agility. So that's driving me up the wall because that is the skill that governed almost everything that they've added to perception this time around. In the past, if I wasn't building a perception in Fallout 3, I believe for the most part covered how far away you got red ticks on your mini compass that would show how far away where enemies were positioned. It also, believe, is the governing skill of energy weapons, which they didn't mention in the special video. So I thought that was interesting. I always kind of considered it slightly a dump stat, not a quite treat it all the way down, but I always put it a little bit lower than other ones because it wasn't as important to me. So it's gonna completely overhaul the way that I build characters, and I think moving forward, because I love stealth. I wasn't able to tell if it actually is gonna cover the sneaking aspect or if it's just gonna cover the physical acts that are associated with sneak skills, like the pickpocketing, the removing of the magazine from the gun, because some people got really mad when I called it a clip last week. And those various physical activity, like the things that involve your hands, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it. I don't know. It's interesting that they're splitting off some sneak skills from agility to perception.
So in some of the previous games, if you had a high perception, it would affect conversation options,
yes,
or give you the option for doing certain quests. And in Fallout 2, right at the beginning, as you're leaving your village, if you have a high perception, you can say, "Hey, that's a nice spear you got there, guy." And if your perception is, under 6, then you don't get that quest. You don't get the cool special spear to start your game. And there's little things like that in all the other games. So it seems like they were trying to make perception a little more interesting, even though it didn't have a really tangible value.
Right.
So since it's going to be part of lockpicking, do you think we're going to get the same old lockpicking game that Bethesda has used for the last 7 years? Because they had a different lockpicking game in Oblivion, and then we had Fallout 3, New Vegas, and Skyrim. Yeah, I was never any good at Oblivion's lockpicking, but by the time I was in my 200th hour of Skyrim, I could pick anything no matter what my character's skill is. So do you think it's time we're going to get a new lockpicking thing?
Oh, I have this kind of bad feeling that I'm trying to figure out if it's just my I don't like change feeling about it because I'm so comfortable with the old game. But I also was never completely satisfied with the old lockpicking skill, and it seems like Bethesda wasn't entirely satisfied with it either, because in Fallout 3 and also New Vegas tangentially, you had these hard limitations on whether, like, if you didn't have a lockpick skill of like 55 or 50, excuse me, you could not do average locks. You just couldn't do it. You couldn't try. You sucked. You weren't good enough. And in Skyrim, they made it so that you could try any lock, but your lockpicks are going to break a lot more easily, and you're going to be less good at doing it. And so that to me shows that they weren't really happy with the original Fallout system, but the Skyrim lockpicking kind of felt strangely broken, for lack of a better way of putting it, because I never felt impeded by any lock anymore. All I had to do was have enough lockpicks to break them. So, I think, yeah, exactly. Just like, I went through all 50 lockpicks. Let me just quick load. Yeah, I hope that they refine it. I do kind of like aspects of the system, like the finding the sweet spot. So it could use with some spit and polish, I think. But a complete overhaul sounds scary to me. I don't like change.
So speaking of change that people may not like, are we going to get a pocket picking mini game, where now instead of just clicking on the person and letting the computer decide whether or not you succeed, are we going to have a little thing where we wiggle our analog stick to pull someone's ammo out of their pocket?
Oh, that I would like, to be honest with you, because I just stayed away from pickpocketing in Fallout 3 in New Vegas because I had no ability to predict any degree of success. I probably could have gone on a wiki and looked at the formulas and memorized, what are my chances here, but they didn't give you like a percentage indicator. There was no way to affect what you were doing as a player other than to just hold your breath and pray that the computer favored you. So I found that to be, I think a mini game for pickpocketing would be pretty nice. Did you notice? And I think the reason you're bringing this up is something that I noticed in the perception video, where they say practice your pilfering on youths, the incapacitated, the elderly, before you practice, do them on other more challenging characters. Did you notice that little sentence?
I did. It definitely indicates there's going to be some ranking system, or some way that you will be able to know what your chances of success are before doing this. So in my experience in playing the Fallout games, I do stealth builds on occasion, but I found that playing a stealth build your first time through the game is not recommended. So in Fallout games, you will often see characters that look scary and look like guards that you're supposed to sneak up behind them and shoot them in the back of the head. But actually, if you just walk up to them, the big scary guard will say, "I don't like the looks of you, but go talk to my superior." And so if you use stealth, like me, the first time you go through a game, the first time I played through Fallout 1, I stealth killed half of Necropolis before realizing that zombies can be friendly. And there were a couple of scenes in Fallout 3 where, I had stealth killed the guard that was going to give me some main quest line, and then I walk into the base and suddenly, everybody's angry at me for some reason, just because I stabbed Bob in the kidney out there.
I've literally never done that ever. I think you just might be bad at stealth characters.
Well, I think maybe I'm a little too good with stealth characters. If I can go through an entire town that has a major quest line and just kill everyone that looks, creepy.
Oh, man.
So I will say, for those of you who who might be considering playing a stealth build, and maybe you've not had a whole lot of experience with Fallout, and maybe you've been with the Splinter Cell franchise for a long time, you might want to avoid putting too many points into stealth at the beginning of your very first playthrough. All right, so just minutes before we recorded this podcast, they released the Endurance video.
That they did.
All right, so what is new with Endurance?
Well, we have Endurance, for one thing, is going to be affecting Sprint. I noticed that right away, which I actually was a little surprised about, because I mean, it makes sense, intellectually, that, that would affect Sprint, but I thought that Sprint would be tied to action points, so therefore it'd be affected by agility. So that was super, a little surprising to me. Something that was really cool that I noticed after watching it a couple times was they have this section in the very beginning where they show a cross-section of your character, it's Vault Boy, but it's symbolizing your character getting hit with radiation, and something that looks like a health meter going down and then they're getting hit with bullets, and then their health meter goes down further. And then this is the most interesting part of it to me, is where they say you need to maintain your body, make sure your body is well maintained, and it has food and water going in, and the health going all the way up to full. So for those of you who play Fallout Shelter, you'll know that your water supply has a great deal to do with how your body deals with radiation. And so I'm starting to suspect that there's a lot of hints about how the mechanics are going to work for Fallout 4 in Fallout Shelter. And I think that you're going to be able, while radiation has been made, in my opinion, a lot more dangerous by having it affect your maximum health, I think that, now there's going to be a way to manage it by drinking fluids and water to help reduce your radiation levels. Like it's going to flush radiation out or something, which I think is a really, really cool idea, actually.
Yes, and I also think that if you're starving, your maximum number of hit points will drop as your endurance drops as well. And that's also something that's hinted at in Fallout Shelter, that if you're not producing enough food, then your everybody's hit points start dropping.
I was kind of up in the air about whether food and water would be important in Fallout 4, because survival mode in Fallout New Vegas was a little so I was a little shaky on whether that'd be a good direction to go with Fallout 4, but this video made me think that maybe there's going to be some sort of survival-y elements that are actually coded into the game. So I'm interested to see how those turn out.
Yeah, I'm also very optimistic about this. I never felt the previous survival needs in the other games were really strict enough. It just felt like you get food, you eat it, you don't really need to worry about whether you're going to actually starve to death or die of dehydration or die of radiation. There's always more than enough of everything that you need for survival.
And they were talking about in the video that somehow it seems that endurance is going to affect what you're able to eat. Like they show him going up, the protagonist character going up against like a Mirelurk during this portion. So I'm curious if you're going to need a certain level of fortitude to be able to eat like radioactive beasts of some kind.
Or uncooked food.
Maybe that's what it is.
Well, in New Vegas, you could find raw meat, and then if you take it to a campfire and cook it, the cooked meat will then give you more hit points to heal. So I do think that you're right, that if you have a low endurance or not the right perks, then you won't be able to actually eat uncooked meat or another form of strange meat that maybe you'd like to tell us about.
Yes, you noticed my favorite part of the whole thing was they did it like they interspersed cannibalism throughout the whole thing. So and it seems as though they're expanding upon it a little bit, because before it was just like, you could eat people for health, or in Fallout New Vegas, you could eat people for food and health. So it seems as though in some way you're going to need to have a certain level of endurance, and you're going to have to take a perk in cannibalism in order to eat, or perks in any sort of exotic food to be able to digest it. Maybe there's some sort of perk that you can, eat trees for all I know.
Or robots.
Your robots. Yeah, I eat nuts and bolts for breakfast. Anyway, I am really excited to see cannibalism featured prominently.
All right, so something that wasn't mentioned in the endurance video is unarmed combat. In New Vegas, endurance was the trait that affected your unarmed combat, and of all the games, New Vegas has the most elaborate unarmed combat system, but it's not mentioned here. So I actually recently did a high endurance character build that was all about the survival trait and unarmed combat, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I do want to see what Fallout 4 is going to do with completely unarmed abilities, because I don't think any of the games so far have gotten it quite right, even though New Vegas took it in the right direction. We have a few very good viewer questions this week. One of them is from Dan Angler, at Dan Angler on Twitter. From the Perception video, legendary mole rat confirmed for Fallout 4. So I think it's possible it's going to be a legendary mole rat. I also think it's possible that the big monster that you see at the end of that video may have just been a cutesy cartoon version of a Deathclaw. But I really think that that's going to be a mole rat queen, and at some point in this game, you are going to have to go into these underground tombs and fight off legions of mole rats until you face off against the mole rat queen. All right, and we have a viewer question from STE3PO3000. Do you think the Memory Den could give us access to the story of power armor units in China? So yes, I think the Memory Den is going to be used to explore all sorts of stuff from the pre-war world that can't really be explored within the main game. That it'll be used to implant memories of soldiers having different adventures and missions, kind of like the way that Operation Anchorage was used in Fallout 3 with their VR pods. So I think the memory dens are going to be used to implant memories of pre-war soldiers. It'll probably be used to implant like recreational memories from doing things in the pre-war world. And it'll also be used in a Matrix-like thing where, you know, Neo, I know Kung Fu. So it may have a training purpose within the game too. And as for Chinese military units before the war, I'm not sure how the American Memory Den would be able to get access to Chinese soldier memories, but I definitely think it's going to be used to explore the pre-war world in a way that they can't justify through the main storyline. Austin, what do you think about the Memory Den?
I think that's pretty spot on, because some of my favorite, I think it'd be a nice way to introduce new settings without actually having to go anywhere. It's kind of, if you think of, again, Project Anchorage, which it was okay DLC, but like the cool thing about it was you're like, oh, I'm in Alaska, even though I'm really in Washington, D.C. that's turned to rubble. So I kind of like the idea of the potential of being able to visit fun, exotic locations. And that also gives a lot of DLC potential as well, and for modders, I think. So I have a reasonable or responsible speculation of sorts. Based on this kind of pattern I've been seeing through, I've had like kind of inklings of this as I was watching the special videos. They keep using this language that I'm not sure if it's just flavor text that's just, you know, kind of just contextualizing the videos as if they're real, or if there's actually hints there. Okay, so in the strength video, the narrator says, so keep doing your chin-ups, you know, so you be strong and stuff. And in perception, it says, you know, it talks about practicing your pilfering, and in endurance, they mention exercising again. And so I said earlier that Fallout Shelter seems to be giving hints and context to what the different skills and how the different mechanics of Fallout 4 will be. And in Fallout Shelter, you can train your residents so that their special goes up. And so I'm curious if there's going to, because they did mention that you can max out your character. So I'm interested if increasing your special is not just a perk that says, you know, that previously it was you just took the intense training perk and you could increase your special by 1 point. I'm curious if there's actually going to be a more practical in-game way of doing it, like running or actually lifting weights of some kind. I'm not sure what it would be, but I think there's gonna be, in order to unlock some perks or in order to increase your special, you're gonna need to actually do something physically in the game. What do you think about that?
Well, all of the games have had some way for the player to increase their abilities. In the first game, the Brotherhood of Steel, if you could sacrifice a lot of money and a lot of in-game time, they would perform an operation that increases each of your special stats. And in Fallout 2, there were a bunch of different factions. The Brotherhood of Steel could do that. The Hubologist could align your neurodynes and increase your intelligence or luck. Fallout 3, of course, had the bobbleheads that players ran all over the world trying to find all these damn things. And then New Vegas got us back to surgical implants. So yes, I think there is going to be something in the game where if you can sacrifice in-game time and resources and maybe real-world time, you'll be able to increase your special skills or your special stats. All right, and I have possibly our most irresponsible speculation so far. I speculate that River is a bad dog. A bad dog.
What's wrong with you?
Just you wait. You watch the video, and at about 50 seconds into it, River runs under the coffee table. So River is a big dog, and she goes under the coffee table, and you know that when she's under there, she's going to get excited by something and jump up and knock over everything on the coffee table. So if you've owned dogs, you know that this is true. So I'm saying that based on what I've seen in this video, I think River is a bad dog and does not deserve a treat.
You're a cold-hearted person, Charles Battersby.
And on that, thank you for tuning into this week's GNN. Don't forget there'll be new episodes of Hidden History and The Storyteller, a Fallout lore series every week, along with sporadic episodes of Elder Scrolls, The Storyteller. So join us here next week when we'll be talking about the Charisma video, along with any other news that's come up in the next week. I'm your host, Charles Battersby.
And I'm Austin Horrigan.
I should say something to the effect of, thank you for listening.
We could just end it there.
Okay.